Good afternoon. My name is Ambrose Moses. I am an extension educator with Central State University Extension in the Community and Economic Development Unit. Want to welcome everyone to CED Office Hour Live, which is a program opportunity that we take to on our CED team to share thoughts, topics, conversations with the community on things that are interesting or relevant to our work within CED, and that we think may be of interest to the community as well. And it's also an opportunity for you to engage with us and in these discussions. This month, our primary topic is centered on urban agriculture. Say it loud, the urban agriculture movement in Ohio. And our topic today, specific topic, is going to be what is the importance of land? And we have with us a special guest who's going to share information from her research, Dr. Brittany Jones, who also has some history with Central State University Extension, being one of the first two of the extension county agents that we had here at the university. And so I want to go ahead and give Dr. Jones a few minutes here to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Ambrose, and thank you just for having me as part of this session. I love talking about this stuff. That's why I'm researching it. So, with that, I am, as Ambrose said, Dr. Brittany Jones. I recently obtained my PhD from the University of Toledo last August, and it's within spatially integrated social sciences. So basically, the study of just how our behaviors and just how we operate within space affects us and vice versa, how we influence the environment around us as well. And really, just getting into this dissertation when it comes to food systems, that was definitely a special place where this can apply because food, especially now, affects our environment as well as affects us in general with our bodies and health. And it's a lot of talk going around about how to improve food access, food security, food environment, and especially with COVID and how we had to access certain food items. And so, with my dissertation, I just looked at it from a land ownership perspective, urban agriculture perspective, and also just within the Black culture perspective as well.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. When I saw your the focus of your doctorate, um, you have to say it again. Say it for one.
Spatially integrated social sciences.
Spatially integrated social sciences. That was going to be one of my questions to ask that you explain that to us, and you gave us a little insight to it. Um, now, in terms of the urban your dissertation, where did you do your where were the areas that you studied? What where geographically where did you focus?
Well, I mainly focused within Toledo, so my home city, and then also Dayton as kind of like a comparative because they are similar in the aspects of their majority white population. They're post-industrial, definitely made their mark within the manufacturing industry at that time when it was peaking, and they're just facing a lot of reconstruction and revitalization, just trying to, especially on the economic forefront, just trying to make sure they sustain themselves. And in general, they are similar in certain demographics, especially when it comes to poverty, definitely race, like I said, definitely the neighborhood makeup, as far as just not gentrification, downtown revitalization, and more of like income and things of that nature. And I just found it interesting. And they're both mid-sized cities. If you are in Ohio, you know the big C's, Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati, and then you have those mid-sized cities that are vying for the funding that is usually going to those big C. cities, and they are similar in that aspect as well.
Okay, okay. And so when we look at the title of your work, Empowerment Through Consumption, Land Ownership, Land Banks, and Black Food Geographies, which there's a lot packed into that. And I was wondering if you could tell us, sort of expand it a little bit, break down each of those components. What are you trying to tell us with that title? What's captured in there?
And that's a good question. Really, that was just kind of inspired with this dissertation was a lot of conversation and work within community here. I've always been just a big part of food security, food system revitalization, but more on the equity side. So when it comes to empowerment through consumption, a lot of that has to do with the Black population, Black culture, when it comes to autonomy and sovereignty over one's body and one's space. And so that's a lot to do with the movements when it comes to building up just urban agriculture projects, community supported agriculture projects, because behind that is more than just nutrition. It's about legacy building, it's about control, it's about having that power through food, through consumption, whether it's physically food or in this case it will be land. And so those three other components after that, when it comes to land ownership, you control your space. And so thus you control everything that is involved within that. And it's the benefit of you. It's that power within what you can do within that space and what you can build upon in the future for that. Land banks come into play because a lot of the cities that have underwent post-industrial and trying to revitalize, there was a lot of empty space, usually due to demolition of housing within the inner city. And so land banks have come in to be that mechanism of, just controlling the space, controlling that land. Land banks in itself, it's a bank that has land. They control the parcels. And so this is an entity that has not been studied too closely when it comes to food, but it has been studied as far as economic development, because majority of the land has always been looked at as far as a moneymaker, economic, commercial, industrial, if you're looking at the zoning categories with that. So when it comes to food and urban agriculture, that in itself is a sticky situation, because if you want to own the land, that you would have to understand the process. And sometimes land banks do not give you that option of ownership, and it's mostly leasing. And so that's been a big hindrance when it comes to urban agriculture. And most of the land that is happening is within Black communities, mostly the inner city communities that are closer to downtowns. And so a lot of that focus has been not on urban agriculture, but mostly, again, on that downtown revitalization. Thus, the Black food geographies portion, because that studies
Hey, I'm
how
in
Black
a
population.
webinar.
Oh, I
How was it?
think
Someone
somebody
needs to
has
mute.
to mute themselves.
Okay, think we got it.
Yep, yep, cool. So when it comes to Black food geographies, it's more of the study of how Black people had to navigate that environment based
Mm.
upon the racism, based upon the discrimination, based upon how the physical landscape has been changed due to, in this case, we would say urban renewal, and just
Mhm.
dealing with a lot of the vacancies that have been happening because everybody is leaving that area. So all three of those are basically breaking down what does empowerment through consumption mean.
Okay. Wow. Oh, that is quite a bit. I guess uh, to hone in on just land banks, for instance, which is, you said, essentially it is just a bank of land, an entity that's holding the land. Are these typically uh, government agencies? Are they private? Are they nonprofit? Or what's the typical structure for these land banks?
Yeah, so land banks, they're very special. They are a nonprofit, but it's a government entity. So they are usually at the county level, sometimes the city level. And usually the city can have their own land bank, whereas the county can have their own. So sometimes the city can have two. Toledo, for instance, they have a city land bank and a county land bank, but the county land bank is usually the one with the most power. So usually they get land through either donation from the residents themselves. They couldn't handle the specific house or land, they can't handle the taxes, or they can actually possess it due to whatever project that they may have in mind for that area. And they can clear out all liens, but they don't have to pay taxes on it. And they basically just hold on to it until whoever they feel is, I guess, deserving of such a parcel, and the project is deemed okay for them to actually give approval for you to get this land. Now, usually it is a process, so you have to apply, you have to do like a plan, you would have to show that you are financially capable of obtaining and holding on to this land. But other than that, it usually goes to housing, which is an important aspect. But when we're talking about urban agriculture, then that is where it gets a little bit tricky because urban agriculture is in its infancy. And so the understanding is not there just yet, unless there has been some big push for, having it be more common within there. Usually land banks, when it comes to that, the growing portion of food, that you have to lease the land, and it's on a yearly basis, and you have to basically prove yourself, if you really want to have that in itself. So that's a common battle, for those who want to have land for growing food. You can't outright own it. You have to
Right.
lease it first. And then if you can afford it, then or prove yourself, then they'll maybe give
Do
it
a
to you.
purchase.
Purchase. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, one of the things that, I mean, this was something that, during those early days in, Cuyahoga County, when we had started, with Central State, I started to hear some of those issues, um, and with my background in the legal background, some of the things meant a little bit different to me than what the other folks in the room. So when you, talk about the license, I mean the lease, for instance, um, what I started to find when I saw some of the documentation, at least in the Cleveland area, that they were not actually being given a lease. It was a license, which is, you have, fewer rights when you have a license. It's like whoever gives you the license can come in and take it, take back possession at any moment. Whereas a lease would give you exclusive possession for whatever that time period. And so to the point that you were making, a lot of the folks who were doing these, their urban farms or gardens, or put in, they have difficulty getting a high tunnel because they were not assured to have that lot for exclusive use of that lot for a certain period of time. And so yeah, so that is one of the, that process is one of the, challenges, to understand. And then I guess, I would probably have to look at it, at sort of like the policy level. So we need to have government understand this as well, in terms of what those needs are.
So
That is.
for here in Cincinnati in real time, that is where Cincinnati is at with the land bank. Land bank has been around a while. They actually invited, meaning the county and the city invited the community councils to ID the initial round when they first started the land bank, what would be good properties that they feel as a community to go into the land bank. But since then, we had the establishment of a port authority that did not do anything with the waterways. It's actually now just called the port, and is really a community development corporation, for the whole county, whereas most community development CDCs are for a particular community. So they have used that to acquire getting into commercial properties as well as residentials, and most of their activities has been in the commercial property space. And a port is also a vehicle for bonding and other specialized pass-throughs for big development funding. But on the land bank now, the city council, our land bank down here is a combination of city and county properties, because our county, all of the property tax income goes to the county. The city's income taxes come from you working. So it's a clear delineation. So all of our land bank is under the county. And yes, when you spoke to the power and the influence and all that, you were totally on point, Miss Brittany. But with our local land bank, um, earlier this year they just passed regulation to make it easier for you to have high tunnels, because they were treating it as if it was a permanent housing structure. And so you had all these extra licensing, like to the tune of another 3 or 4 thousand of licensing, another 6 months of process to get something that didn't apply. So they have just started really amending the rules and regulations, buildings and inspections process um, to include, to be more in line to that. Also, the city council has prioritized, if you want to do urban farming, then they have some other leniencies that they have put in place, but there's still also a lot of challenges and roadblocks. And Gordon Reed is on here. He can speak to that. I believe it might be some limitations on what you can farm, right? In that land bank is they're determining what you want to farm, what you can farm and what you can't farm. So, Gordon, hopefully he will speak on that before we finish today. There you go, Gordon. Go ahead and start talking.
Good afternoon.
You know I was going to bring you in the
I
conversation,
didn't know
Gordon.
you were going to do that. No
Please,
problem.
but before you answer the question, please tell them about your nonprofit. Make sure you tell them about your nonprofit and what you're doing in the farming space.
Oh, I just came out of a meeting with them. Okay. My name's Gordon Reed. I am co-founder of Farms to Grow Incorporated. We are a nonprofit 501(c) organization. We are headquartered in Oakland, California, and we are an advocacy and a support system for Black and underserved farmers here in the United States or here in North America. We are the only group that actually works with the farmer or the grower at their growing site. We actually go to the farms, we actually go to the growing sites, and we provide technical assistance, business development assistance. We assist right now. We have a program in California where we're helping with the GAP program, getting the farmers to that point and getting them in NRCS programs. Okay. To address what's going on in Cincinnati, late last year, City Council passed an ordinance that no urban farm could be larger than 19,000 square feet. So any of the farms that weren't already, well, no, new farms could be larger than 19,000 square feet. So any farmers or any urban growers who were not already established, you're basically being limited to a little more than a third of an acre that you're allowed to grow now. And there were a number of farms that have been established the last 8 or 9 years, which were, some of them were funded by, what are they called? The block grants. They had block grant funding in order to get established. And they have pretty good markets right now set up with the grocery stores and some restaurants and some small venues like that. So within the minority community here, there are plenty of vacant lots, former houses, some former schools that have no longer in existence, and those are no longer accessible to anyone in order to provide community-based gardens or community-based food plots within the city of Cincinnati. I don't know the reason why that happened, it was kind of a shot in the dark right out of the blue. But they're limiting the size of a farm, and they call them urban farms, to 19,000 square feet.
Wow.
That
And
Now,
really, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
okay, in Hamilton County today, I think there's only 3 farms still active that are actually commercial farms. Everything else is either a nursery or some type of a greenhouse that would be within the city limits. But for a straight farm, I don't think there's any left in the city that I know of, and there won't be any coming of any size in the near future.
Hmm. Hmm. And I'm glad that you actually said that. And I mean, it's wonderful that Cincinnati is taking that step and actually prioritizing, recognizing just urban ag. But I see that it is an angle to that. And it's good because okay, everybody wants it, everybody is interested in it, but then on the other side they are thinking of okay, well, where is this economic development? That is usually the conversation when it comes to the political spectrum, the governmental spectrum. How does it add to economic development? Whereas within the communities, they're thinking more of how is this more legacy building, community building, again, control over the space and just sustaining their neighborhood. So it's that clash of ideologies that has really stifled a lot of urban agriculture. You can get policy, especially if you push for it. But when it comes to how to actually materialize it and sustain it, that ideology has to be on the same page. And that is usually the same story across a lot of cities, and especially in Ohio when it comes to this, because we are a big agricultural state, but it's that traditional agriculture. And so you have that other clash with traditional farmers, and now you have urban farmers coming in, and they are thinking, oh, well, you're trying to replace us. But no, that's not it. It's more about access. It's more about just having that access to the foods and more of that skill building too, because this is becoming part of more is getting back into those careers, more like what Central State is doing with their degrees when it comes to just urban agriculture and that sustainable agriculture. Ohio State, what they were doing with their horticulture is coming back, just getting more into that education career planning, but is still thinking, okay, well, urban ag is just a hobby. It's just something that's community based. And that's not it at all. It's trying to grow into something, but it's again that policy, that governmental thought process when it comes to it that is really hindering a lot of this growth.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and sort of to the point that we had talked about a little earlier before we got on the call, Dr. Jones. We were talking about correlation of the access to food and the access to land, and it seems that what's being described there by Mr. Reed is sort of a limitation on a direct limitation on the access to that land. We'll give you access, but only so much,
Right.
which is going to
And there's only
then
so much you
limit
can do
what
on
actual
Right.
food you can. Yeah.
Right. And then the other part of that is that the so-called traditional farmers don't address the minority and underserved clientele or customers with what they grow.
Yep.
And so, there's a big group of individuals who do not have access to quality food or who have access to nutritional food because the traditional farmers or the large farmers don't grow that stuff for small communities or small individuals. They can't make any money selling to 6 families.
Yep.
Okay. And so they don't grow those items, and they grow primarily those items that can be put in a can or frozen that way in bulk. And so that diversity of food which you find in the individuals that are handling 3 acres or less in growing, is gone. You've got your standard stuff. Ohio is known for corn. Ohio is known for soybean. Ohio is known for tomatoes. Ohio is known for pork. Those are the items.
Yep, that is true. So
Okay,
true.
Well, let's get Kip Curtis in. So you have your hand up, Kip?
Oh, you're muted. Okay, there we go.
Sorry. Yeah, I was the one screaming before. I didn't realize I had my mic on, and now I couldn't get it turned back on. Hi, Brittany. Thanks. I really appreciate the work that you're doing, and Gordon as well. Just absolutely fascinating work. So I've just been thinking about. I'm working in a small city in Ohio, and in fact, in the small cities, I mean, the land banks are giving the land away. They've, thousands of acres. So there's opportunity out there in the small cities. And I'm starting to do some work in Columbus as well, where it's a tangle. And I think this is the challenge in the medium size and the larger cities, which is, the cities themselves, I think, in probably more benevolent a way than we'd like to think, are trying to revitalize their cities. And part of that is economic flow, right? And so they want to hold on to these properties for the value that they contain. That's Columbus' story over and over again. We'll lease it to you. We won't sell it to you. I think it's a dangerous move for any farmer to lease land, particularly land that a city is holding to raise value, because they'll be asked to go as soon as that real estate improves. So it's a tricky problem. It's encouraging, however, to hear what's happening in Cincinnati. And I want to put a slightly different spin, Gordon, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So the good news about a third of an acre is that you can produce about $35,000 worth of crop off a third of an acre if you build your urban farm right. And I know this because we're doing a project in Mansfield where we're building third of an acre, what we're calling micro farms, 2 high tunnels, indoor, outdoor, full season growing. And we're not quite at the target yet because the system is still coming into being, but that is a productive commercial site. And it may be that the right way to pivot on Cincinnati is to say, thank you. We want to build a whole lot of micro farms on these things now, and not see it as a hindrance, but see it as an opportunity, because if they're willing to make that work, it's workable. And the what we know about growing on that site, on that size of thing, is workable as well. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts on that, Gordon, because I know the scale thing is, ultimately a farmer might want to have a larger scale than that, but it's a reasonable scale for a single farmer in an urban setting, with the right setup. We're doing it with a cooperative in Mansfield, so all of our growers are following a crop plan based on what our cooperative has already sold, essentially. And so they have a lot of certainty that when they put that seed in the ground, if they take it through to harvest, they've got a market for what they're growing. And one of our side benefits in all of this, back to I think, Brittany, the work that you're doing, is that it's created wealth in households and communities. Wealth is part of that legacy. It's created land ownership, and it's produced an enormous surplus of not quite marketable food. And so it's not bad food, but the market's pretty strict about what the tomato needs to look like, what the carrot needs to look like. And that's flowed into the food insecurity space in the communities as well. And all of this is to say that if we can figure out a way to anchor urban agriculture, I think the potential that it has to revitalize communities is still ripe. And I know there's a lot of scholars who are kind of souring on that idea, but I think Ohio is got an enormous opportunity at this point, in part because of deindustrialization, because all of our small cities have so much land, so do our large cities, even if they won't necessarily let it out. And we could be the incubator for change, I think, because of those circumstances.
Well, Kip, go ahead, Brittany.
No, I would say that's a good point. The size is more of just how you manage that land. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you did bring up that point, because there are certain high price crops that one could grow that can definitely bring in a lot of profit. For example, just thinking about from my research, when I was looking in Dayton, It is this one grower who actually, what happened with her, I believe it was called Garden City and Garden Station. And so they were on leased land from the city, but urban farm was just spectacular. They had community events. They were placed in the community that was very active. They grew crops and sold them, so it was more of a cooperative. And so it was just very, very vibrant. However, a developer came in and said, I want to buy that land and turn it into a parking lot. What happened? That's what happened. Well, actually, I wouldn't say that's what happened. They bought the land, demolished all the things that were grown, but the parking lot was not built. So it's just in the possession of this seller, but because it was in prime space, it was just top notch for that economic. I think she was close to downtown, and that's what happened. So she actually converted that into another business where it's more online, but she sells her crops and she can grow like thousands of dollars of just crops on this small space. Same here in Toledo. We have an urban farmer here. He completely transformed a part of the neighborhood that was just desolate. But the pushback from the local administration caused him to have almost gone to bankruptcy. And it was more of that relationship, the ego driven portion of it. And basically they just didn't like him. And so that was at prime time when downtown was getting to that point. And so now he's thriving and he makes his own soil. He bought a lot of lots because he quote unquote proved himself. And so it was more allowable. And he's just thriving of just the different crops. But it took, I would say, this started back in like 2014. And just now he's getting more accepted for that. So it really is that knowledge of the land, knowledge of the crops that you can grow for high prices, especially if you're trying to get into that business aspect. And that's where that fine line between community gardens and urban ag is that business model when it comes to urban ag. And that's what people need to understand when it comes to what do you want to do? How is this adding to your community?
And so I'm gonna put an opinion out about that. I think we've invested more energy in community gardening than in commercial urban agriculture. And I think that's been to the detriment of both. Because if you've got strong urban commercial agriculture, and this is what we're finding in Mansfield, you also suddenly have an enormous community farming space taking place as well. Only they don't have to go looking for charitable dollars to keep themselves afloat. They're paying and supporting it because they've got a robust commercial operation working as well. Yes. So I like to break down the lines between them because I think we do think about them separately. They are very different kinds of endeavors ultimately when you're talking about what's happening on the ground. But if the question is, how do we build these things so they will sustain? I think connecting them somehow, even in a private or a profit, not-for-profit combination, offers the promise, because ultimately the charitable dollars for urban agriculture are going to disappear. It's just like every other set of charitable dollars. It's been robust for a long time. It's not going to be there forever, but we want these gardens to be part of these communities forever.
That is very, very true.
Correct.
One of the things, in order to address your question about what's going on in Cincinnati, you would have to take a historic look at the farmers markets here in Cincinnati, when they were established and who were providing them with produce or with their goods, because our farmers markets had a lot of meat vendors. And as you were to progress, you would see where the city has come in and has put standards, and I'm not knocking the standards, but they've put standards on whom can sell and where they can sell. We have a number of truck farmers that sell at the Findlay Market and over at the Lunkin Market, and there have been a number of smaller truck farmers or growers throughout Hamilton County that come into other small established food venue markets on the weekends, okay? But the criteria that Cincinnati has set up puts limitations on what they can bring in, how much they can bring in, and where they can sell. There were a number of truck farmers who are in their second or third generation of doing it that used to come right into the community and sell out of the back of their trucks. It's the same produce that they take to the farmers market and sell it at their stands. But if you were selling it out of the back of your truck, you were probably going to get fined.
Yep.
So you have to go to the farmers market where you have to pay fees. You have to sell between the hours that they've established. You can't sell outside those hours. And whatever you don't sell during that time frame, you can't sell it to somebody who comes there late or catches up with your vehicle. I'd like to buy this. I was late getting there. You had already gone, and I want to buy it from you. And, it becomes a control of what is happening with the open farmer versus the established grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you were to take a look at the history of the open air markets in Cincinnati, the health rules and regulations that they've established, and when and where they're allowed, the local farmers are allowed to sell their produce, you will see something of I want to say a dictatorship or a dictatorial presence, where if either you're going to sell it to industrial farmers or industrial processors, or you're going to sell it at a farm stand in front of your house. But that space in between, where there are people who would buy a bushel of string beans or a bushel of tomatoes off of the back of your truck, no, we're going to stop that. You can't do that anymore. You've either got to be in one of these farming spaces, one of these market spaces, or, go back home. And the issue is everybody doesn't have transportation to the markets. It was a convenience, and it was a convenience that the farmer didn't mind doing because he had customers lined up that would buy. So as you say, the political piece is very strong in Cincinnati, in Hamilton County, in Northern Kentucky, when you start talking about small farmers. And, a lot of the small farmers that are here are specialty farmers. They may not grow more than 5 different crops, but those crops pay for themselves. And the only other group that gets around that are the restaurateurs. They can buy from them anywhere.
Yep. And I think that's important to really take into consideration, especially if a community is ready to go into that venture, because it's that fine line between, okay, we want control and sovereignty over our space, but you're still going to have that intervention of the state in somehow, because whether it's funding, whether it's just regulation, whether it's, just, I wouldn't even say oversight, but those links to certain resources that you would need in order to sustain it is very tricky in order to balance that. And so that's why it's important for the communities to understand where they're going, what are the goals, was that shared vision, do you have that access to financial capital or some sort of system of capital that would, you can take care of yourself after, let's say, the grant runs out per se. And do you have that sustained passion? Because myself and Ambrose was talking earlier today, passion can only take you so far, because you can get burned out after a certain amount of time. And especially if you're relying on grants a lot, which is usually a year to maybe 5 years, once that grant is done, then it's like, okay, well, what do we do next? But it's all about that longevity thinking. And that is really another stifle within the urban ag, because, even though agriculture has been here, it is in a different space. But now we have to get back into that mindset, that agrarian mindset of just, growing for ourselves. We've been reliant on the commercial food system for a long, long time. So it's that relearning. And a lot of that wisdom is dying out with the older generation. And so that's why it's even more urgent to really get and hone in on that wisdom and that knowledge of just connecting back to the land, connecting back to nature. Because you see what's going on right now, what happened with COVID. Everybody's fighting over food within the supermarkets. There was nothing there. And now you're hearing about all of the food processing factories burning down. You see the climate that's changing right now. It's things are happening to our food that we need to really be aware of. And so that's where that self-sufficiency definitely needs to come into play. And these type of conversations, especially when it comes to our governmental officials and that policy, it needs to be in place because again, you can start all the projects you want, but they can come in and say, well, you weren't authorized to do this on this land. And so now you have to start from scratch. Everything is wasted. And at that point, you're probably like, okay, well, I don't feel like doing it no more. So it is really, it's kind of a balance game where it's responsibility on both the government, local government, maybe state government, because you're talking about the hoop houses, and that's a whole other deal in itself, but also that community. You have to know where you're going. What is your plan? And who are you going to put in place in order to make sure that this keeps going and is strong? That's the key, to be strong enough to be at those tables, to know what you want, to have just those resources at hand in the event something goes awry.
Right.
So to that point, it sounds like you're describing a need for almost like some kind of centralization or some to pull this together, this urban ag space, so you can have that, so you can develop that sustainability, so that you can develop the knowledge transfer to the growers, who can maximize, using the formula that that Kip is talking about, of being able to take 1/3 of an acre and generate 35,000 worth of revenue off of that. And is there, have you seen any centralization or any kind of networking or structures being put in place, or is everything just so pocket?
It's
Can I
mostly
address part of that?
pocket.
Yeah, can I address part of that? Two groups, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and UJAMA. Okay, I'm gonna blow it again. UJAMA CED Co-op Alliance. I believe that's it. Oh Lord. Those two groups.
The national, for the national part. In Ohio, not so much. You have the Ohio Food Policy Network.
Right.
And that is mostly run through Ohio State University, and mostly just has a lot more committees, steering members within Columbus. So I'm also part of that steering committee, but the whole push is to really branch out. We need more people to be on that committee so from different cities and just different areas of Ohio. And really, that is the only big one to address the Ohio food policy here. But there needs to be others. There needs to be more centralization, especially if we're talking about equity or just race in general. If you're going to go that route, and for like the Black farmers or just melanated growers in general, then we would have to have a network that operates in that same facet. But of course, it's going to be from a different angle, because we're doing it for cultural, for legacy building, for just more of that camaraderie and just strengthening our history and the roots when it comes to growing. But other than that, everybody's doing their own thing, which is okay, because there are certain issues that will take precedent because of where you live at. And so with that, it will be even stronger just to bring all that together, because more heads are better than one when it comes to addressing this issue. And even though the geography is different, the issue is still the same. And so just working together in that type of just mindset, in that type of network, that is something that definitely needs to be built for just the sustainability of and the equity of food systems here. in Ohio.
If you look at the alliance, you will see how that's being accomplished now, slowly but steadily. Right now, there are 46 um, different groups across the United States that have joined the alliance, and they have other 501(c)(3)s that are applying for membership. UJAMA is less than 2 years old. In January, they opened a Black owned and operated seed company, and they put out a seed catalog for diaspora seeds between Africa, South America, and North America. That's coming out. That catalog will increase for next year. They had 120 varieties this year, and they're trying to double that for next year. There are several entities within Ohio that belong either to Farms to Grow, UJAMA, or the Alliance as members. I know the 2 stores in Dayton belong to the Alliance, and there is another farmer up in Cleveland, Riddall, in Cleveland, belong to the Alliance. So it's grassroots, it's growing slowly, but we're bringing more members on. And as far as what they're looking at what's being done at the community level or at the local level. Although they're serving nationally in scope and what they're searching or what they're trying to accomplish, their strength is what's going on at the local level. That's where they're building their base from. And that's about all I know.
Okay. Wow. That is great. Well, thank you all for sharing so far. I mean, this is
Ambrose, I wonder, excuse me for jumping in here, but I wondered, and I don't want to spend your money, but I wonder if this is an opportunity for CSU. I mean, I do think there is so much dynamic urban agriculture taking place in all of our cities, that, a network of that kind that's focused and, I mean, thinking about Brittany's goals, in fact, focused on this legacy, on this control, on this land ownership, because I think even though every situation is different, the obstacles are similar across the board, and that's where political power comes from, right? Is having all the folks who are facing that together, going, oh, wait a minute, look around, there's a bunch of us.
Mm-hmm. And to that
it's
point,
funny that you would say that, because Ambrose and I, since the first session in the series on urban farming, we were so inspired. We have mapped out and talked to some of the urban farmers and say, hey, will you mind us helping to facilitate what you're talking about, a network? Because we found that you have all of these pockets of urban farmers, but they're doing awesome things. So let us, as a CED team, be that convener, and so that we can kind of organize that voice and make sure that voice is at the decision-making table. And they can share best practices with each other, and you organically promote the things that they're doing with their local communities and across the state. So that is in our, we save the world probably every other team meeting we have. But it's got us on fire, and we've been talking about it every day this week. So we are working on that. So Gordon, yes, I'm going to be reaching out to you.
You better hurry up before I leave.
You can't go nowhere. You're not allowed.
One thing I'd like to mention in regards to legacy, Farms to Grow has a documentary coming out in the fall called Rhythms of the Land. And what it is, it's addressing those ancestors, those older Black farmers, which have been carrying the load for the last 70 years. And it speaks to that gap that we have between who our current Black farmers are and where our new farmers are coming from. There's about a 40-year gap where there's no farmers. The average age of a Black farmer today is like 83. The average age of the new farmer is somewhere between 18 and 22, 23. So there's a 50, 60-year gap of folks not going into farmers. And if you want to get a viewing of that, a showing of the film, contact Farms to Grow, and they will be happy to bring Rhythms of the Land to your location.
Okay. Can I'll follow up with you offline, Gordon, to get their contact information again, and so that we can make sure we can give that information out to the audience.
Yeah. Wow, that difference in terms of the age, the generational gap there is that's phenomenal. And then I think when you put it into context, let's say in Ohio, then you have your traditional or rural agriculture and your urban agriculture. It's gonna in Ohio, the Black population is located in the urban and suburban areas. I mean, so in terms of building into that space in Ohio, it's going to be in those urban areas. And then part of the idea is then putting into place some processes to expand into the rural agriculture, get more African Americans and other people of color into the rural areas with their farms and agricultural projects. So yeah, so Kip, to your point, yeah, we were talking, Amber and I, and it's about from our perspective, being more of a sort of a catalyst or sort of facilitating some of that networking of these entities. There are groups, individuals, different projects, coalitions, but to sort of help weave this web so that the resources and the knowledge can sort of flow among them and then sort of bring it all up together. So yeah, so that's sort of the thought. But we're going to be reaching out to you because when you were talking about the 35,000 a year off of 1/3 acre, the micro farms, that's whatever that formula is. We need to know that. And a lot of people need to know that. So we are coming up. I do want to thank everyone for their participation today. We are coming up on our 3 o'clock, our the end of our time today. So I wanted to know, are there any final comments, any messages, anything you want to share? And Brittany, we'll start with you, Dr. Jones, our guest. Anything you want to share? Any final thoughts?
I'm just very excited that, this is becoming a relevant and fast forwarding topic. Definitely just the action behind it because it's needed. Like I said, our food system is in danger. It is causing a lot of issues currently. And so now we, as just people, but then also when we break it down culturally, we have to be more aware of what we're ingesting and also what our environment, surrounding environment, is doing to us when it comes to our food. And we just need to really get out of that mindset that we don't need to grow anymore. We don't need to do this because we see it breaking down right in front of our eyes. And so this is a call for action to really organize and to really think long term, like 10, 20 years, about how this is going to look, not just in Ohio, but nationally. That's where all of just getting together in general, but Ohio definitely needs to get that together because we are an agricultural state, but it's that traditional agriculture of food that doesn't universally apply to everybody. And so people just need to get out of their comfort zone and just really take into consideration what can you do to help your body and then help your community through food. So empowerment through consumption, basically.
Empowerment through consumption. You pull it all back together there. Thank you, Dr. Jones. And Amber, did you have any final thoughts you want to share?
Um, I had on my planner hat today. Um, so I'm taking it all in from a planner perspective. For those who don't know, planning, community planning is almost in a 20-year cycle. So things that were planned 2 years, 20 years ago is happening now. So that's just kind of that planning cycle. So 2 year, just supporting what Dr. Jones said, that is very important for us to put infrastructure, get at that table so that we can affect generations to come, not only our current generations, our current society, but the generations to come, and we just become a healthier society in general.
Yay, Amber, to being a planner. I'm a planner. That's my background
Yes.
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for sharing today. Our next session, our final session this month will be on the 28th, next Thursday, and we will focus on the impact of the role of extension in the urban agriculture movement. So it gives us an opportunity to hear some ideas, share some thoughts of what we as the Cooperative Extension Service can be doing in that space. And we'll talk about, really have to keep in mind that we have the two land grant institutions, the Ohio State University and Central State University, and we're not in competition with one another because we actually have a charge to maintain a unified system of extension across the state. And so it would be important, to even have some perspectives and thoughts from both of those institutions, and how the community engages with them as well. So again, that'll be this coming Thursday at 2 p.m. Same place, but it'll be a different link. So Amber, final
Yes. And I
thoughts?
just want that reminded me that because this conversation has been so engaging and there's so many assets and facets to it, we will be continuing the conversation next month because I have August. We rotate who's the lead facilitator, and we will come back to the different urban farming groups and individuals and take a deeper dive into the programming that they're doing and how they even came up with the programming and what are they doing to sustain that programming in their areas. And they're leveraging things. You hear USDA as the main funder, but some of them some are youth employment programming, some are using beautification projects, some of them are using the arts and has an art gallery where in Columbus, Bronzeville, took a rail container and converted it to an art gallery. So they have that arts enrichment piece, even though we say STEM is really STEAM, and STEAM is that arts enrichment piece. So we'll be exploring some of those things and starting to talk about continue that conversation on our role of extension and how we can help augment those programs, because a lot of those programs affected different teams within extension, right? It's agriculture, natural resources, it's 4-H, it's economic development, it's youth development, it's family consumer sciences, and we'll be talking about those things as well. And then we will continue. So we'll be continuing that conversation and hope that you continue to support us and engage with us as we just have our CED office hour live. And we look forward to seeing you every Thursday at 2 p.m.
And she concludes right at 3 o'clock. So thank you all.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.